America was essentially created by Christians seeking religious freedom to worship without the state interfering. Even the first freedom in the First Amendment enshrined religious freedom. But today, critics note, that freedom is at risk.
The Equality Act, of which you are a vocal supporter, that has now come out of the House of Representatives, is a radical piece of legislation that, among other things, explicitly repeals significant aspects of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act to take away our religious liberties.
I think the Equality Act is an atom bomb to decimate religious freedom in America. I think you'll see, if it were to ever pass, you will see a direct attack against the church.
On February 25, 2021, the U.S. House of Representatives passed the so-called Equality Act with a vote of 224 to 206.
The Equality Act is federal legislation that would change the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which was intended to protect against racial discrimination. It would add sexual orientation and gender identity as protected classes.
Critics note there's a high cost when we enact laws that abandon God's design and embrace the radical ideas behind sexual orientation and gender laws.
Now, it's a very misleading name because instead of creating equality, it would actually create inequality because it would establish the sexual ideology as a state orthodoxy, and it would lead to the punishment of people who disagree with this politically correct idea of same-sex marriage and gender identity ideology. And that's why we've seen with similar laws in the states that people have been punished. People like Jack Phillips, the baker in Colorado, Barronelle Stutzman, the florist in Seattle.
As a follower of Jesus Christ, I believe that the Bible teaches that a wedding marriage is between a man and a woman. While I would gladly serve them anything else, I couldn't create a cake, in this case, create a cake that would imply my participation in that.
And the judge basically told me that I can have my faith, but I can't practice it. So he basically told me I had to live my faith within the four walls of the church, which isn't going to happen because Christ is my life.
Clearly, in addition to the right of conscience, our God-given rights of free speech and the free exercise of religion are threatened by this radical legislation.
During the hearings in the House of Representatives, there were numerous amendments offered to try to protect religious freedom in America, to allow the church to continue to do its job and to do its business, and they were consistently defeated by the left majority on the House committee because they understand that religious freedom cannot be tolerated if things like the Equality Act are going to be passed.
The very first right mentioned in the very first amendment to the Constitution, in the very first amendment of the Bill of Rights, is your right to practice your faith the way you see fit. And they put in their legislation, no, you can't.
The sexual orientation and gender identity laws are really laws that are on a collision course with religious freedom. When you see these things advancing, many of the proponents of these laws understand that religious freedom is on a collision course. There are two trains on one set of tracks going toward each other. And so the advancement of these SOGI laws come at the expense of religious freedom. They are mutually exclusive.
And another consequence, I think, for parents to particularly pay attention to is the potential for the imposition of sexual orientation and gender identity curriculum in public schools throughout the country. So after the 1964 Civil Rights Act was passed, courts began to implement Black history curriculum to remedy past discrimination. If we begin to treat sexual orientation and gender identity the same way that we treat race, courts could begin to impose this kind of sexual orientation and gender identity curriculum on schools that is already being objected to by parents in multiple states.
They're really coming after Christians who hold to a biblical worldview on the family because there is just a certain contingent that wants to say your family is what you can create, maybe with your same-sex partner, maybe with your same-sex wife or your same-sex husband, and they can adopt children. And as we see more of these cultural changes taking place through legislation like the Equality Act, especially if it passes all the way through Congress and is signed into law, that's going to be a game changer for the church. And we are just going to have to go back to the basics and say, God taught us what is real. We just can't move away from that. What I always say to Christians is, you know what is true, stay the course.
Civil rights are based on immutable characteristics like skin color, ethnicity, place of origin, things you can't change. and religion, because that's in the Constitution. When you add behavior-based characteristics, you open the door wide to all sorts of claims. The Equality Act would essentially criminalize Christianity. In effect, it says if you don't accept the brave new world that we're constructing, in which you have to say a man is really a woman, that two men are a marriage, that children should be taught homosexual techniques, if you resist any of that, we're going to charge you under the civil rights laws. And you can lose your job, you can be fined, you can eventually go to jail just for trying to tell the truth about human behavior. A number of experts in the legal world have looked at this and said this is totalitarianism, pure and simple. It criminalizes beliefs of millions of people in this country. And you know, it doesn't do the people who are caught up in homosexuality and gender identity dysphoria any favors by encouraging them to remain in behavior that God says is sinful and unhealthy. Compassion tells us if somebody's running toward the edge of a building, you say, stop, please don't go over the edge. That's not hateful, that's not bigoted, that's compassion. And if the Equality Act passes, if the Supreme Court rules that gender identity and sexual orientation belong in civil rights law, we'll be in a situation where if we're standing at the edge of that building and saying no, we'll be hauled away in handcuffs for being bigots. It's that simple and that scary.
I love my wet shoes.
Another concern of the so-called Equality Act is that it would codify in law complete protections for a man claiming to be a woman or vice versa.
Human beings are two sexes, and you've either got the chromosomes of a male or the chromosomes of a female, and to deny that is to deny basic reality. And to put people who have what used to be called and should be called gender dysphoria under a protected class, and to say that if you discriminate, if you say no, that you're not a different sex than you were born, that you are discriminating, and we're going to open up all the restrooms and all the other facilities to be in a protected status for this. It's insanity. It's legal insanity.
Our sincere hope is that the senators of both parties would recognize the serious threat that this poses to religious liberty, and frankly the fact that it is likely unconstitutional. The fact that the legislature would be trying to infringe upon the free exercise rights of people of all faiths, not just evangelical Christians, but Catholics, Muslims, Buddhists, the fact that they would be told that they cannot follow the clear teachings of their faith and the dictates of their conscience, but instead would have to capitulate, to knuckle under what the current fads are in relation to sexual orientation and gender identity. It's really deeply troubling and discouraging to see that even some conservative Republican lawmakers were co-opted by these arguments in the House vote.
This piece of legislation would single-handedly tax every church out of existence. It would shut down Christian schools who don't want to go along with teaching about homosexuality or transgenderism. These are real consequences to this type of legislation, and we should be fighting it and at least educating Americans about all of the consequences tied to it.